Good evening, my seekers of the strange. Nocturne speaking. Have you ever truly considered the concept of an exchange rate? I don't mean the frantic dance of currencies in the lofty cathedrals of finance. I mean the true price of absolute security, a cost measured not in dollars, but in the unraveling thread of your own future. Tonight, from the Codex, we examine a peculiar realm where these two concepts blur, where a man named Michael Ramsey unearths a formula that promises the one thing every trader craves: perfect, irrefutable certainty. And now, let us descend into the Codex of Restless Dreams. The Time Exchange. Act 1. Aperture. That Tuesday morning, fortunes evaporated and materialized in microseconds, their electronic ghosts dancing across screens that bathed the trading floor in spectral blue light. In this flickering cathedral of digital wealth, Michael Ramsey stood motionless, transfixed not by the millions won and lost around him, but by the very peculiar formula on his monitor. He stared at the formula on his screen, a precise sequence of variables and operators he'd unearthed, buried in an academic paper on market prediction algorithms. Most of it made sense to him: standard deviations, volatility indices, the usual mathematical architecture of quantitative finance. But there was one notation that puzzled him: time exchange, followed by decimal values that changed with each variable adjustment. The paper had offered no elaboration on the term. Some academic jargon, he'd assumed. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Ellis said, appearing at his shoulder. "Found something good?" Michael minimized the window. "Maybe. Early days." Later that evening, after most traders had left, Michael ran a conservative test. He keyed in the formula with minimal values, leaving the time exchange at its lowest setting of 0.02, and executed a small trade on an unremarkable mid-cap stock. The system accepted his parameters with a simple confirmation screen. "Execute with time exchange 0.02. He clicked confirm. Nothing dramatic happened. The trade went through. By morning, it would either work or not. At home that night, Michael placed his wallet and keys on the dresser beside a framed photo of himself and his parents from a fishing trip 5 years ago. He paused, frowning. The colors looked wrong, yellowed and faded at the edges, as though the photo were decades old rather than a few years. He picked it up, rubbing his thumb across the strangely brittle surface. The glossy finish remained, but the image had undeniably aged. A trick of the light, perhaps. He placed it back down, but as he turned away, something flickered in his peripheral vision. A swift, deeper shadow moving across the wall where no shadow should be. When he turned back, everything was still. Sleep came uneasily that night, filled with dreams of clocks whose hands spun backwards. Act 2. Erosion. The next morning he arrived early. The numbers didn't lie. Michael's test trade had yielded a 17% return overnight, remarkable for a mid-cap stock with no news or catalyst. He stared at his terminal, pulse quickening as he ran correlation analyses against every conceivable market factor. Nothing explained it. The formula had simply known, as if it possessed a foresight that defied logic. The trading floor was nearly empty, just a few dedicated insomniacs hunched at their stations. Michael increased the parameters, setting the mysterious time exchange value to 0.15. The system hesitated this time, the confirmation dialog appearing with a slight delay after a perceptible lag. Execute with time exchange 0.15. His finger hovered over the mouse. Something about the notation bothered him now. A faint, almost subliminal echo of a phrase from the academic paper: temporal cost considerations. But the projected return, glowing on his screen, 43%, dissolved his hesitation. He clicked, confirm. The screens flickered, not just his, but all the monitors on the floor, a synchronized blink that drew startled glances from the other early traders. For the barest fraction of a second, Michael thought he saw his own reflection in the darkened screen, but older, hair salted with gray, lines etched beside his eyes. Then, the system returned to normal, his trade executed. By noon, the stock had performed exactly as the formula predicted, down to the second decimal place. Michael sat back in his chair, a peculiar cold sweat gathering at his temples, despite his triumph. He reached for his coffee mug, his hand faltering as he noticed something that stopped his breath. The ceramic was worn smooth at the handle's curve. The university logo faded to a ghost of itself. Yesterday, the mug had been new. Ellis appeared again, dropping a congratulatory hand on Michael's shoulder. Big win? Just lucky, Michael murmured, quickly minimizing his screens. Doesn't look like luck to me. Ellis nodded toward Michael's hands. You've developed quite the trader's callus there. Michael stared at his right index finger. A faint, unfamiliar roughness snagged his attention. A hardened oval of skin had formed where it met the mouse button, the kind of callus that took years to develop. He hadn't had it yesterday. He was certain of that. I guess I've been putting in more hours than I realized, he said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Ellis shrugged and moved on, but Michael remained frozen, the first real tendrils of dread coiling in his stomach. He looked at his reflection in the darkened monitor beside him. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he saw that same older version of himself looking back, eyes hollow with a knowing look that seemed to pierce through him. Michael's apartment door grated slightly when he unlocked it that evening, as though the frame had settled over time. He didn't remember it doing that this morning. Inside, he froze. The living room walls, painted pristine white just months ago, now showed faint yellowing near the ceiling corners. His leather sofa, purchased only last year, displayed a web of fine cracks along the armrests. The surface felt strangely stiff and brittle to his touch, the kind that took a decade of use to develop. He set down his wallet beside an unfamiliar prescription bottle. His own name leaped out at him from the label. Atorvastatin, 40 milligrams, for cholesterol, prescribed to Michael Ramsey 3 years from today's date. I don't have high cholesterol, he whispered to the empty room, his voice trembling slightly. Yet, the medication looked used, a few pills visibly gone from the blister pack, the labels slightly worn. He moved to his desk, where financial statements lay scattered, statements he didn't recognize. His accounts, certainly, but the balances, astronomical. The dates on them spanned the next 5 years, charting a meteoric rise in his personal wealth. Michael sank onto his aged sofa, heart hammering against his ribs. The formula, the time exchange values, the strange temporal cost considerations mentioned in the paper. He thought of his older reflection, the worn coffee mug, the callus that had materialized from nowhere. A pattern was forming in his mind, too absurd to fully articulate, yet too consistent to dismiss. Each trade with a higher time exchange value had brought with it more of these temporal incursions, things from his future appearing in his present, or perhaps he was moving toward them. A framed photo on his bookshelf caught his eye, one he didn't recognize. He approached it cautiously, as if it might shatter the fragile reality around him. The image showed an older version of himself, with a woman he didn't recognize, both smiling on a beach he'd never visited. He studied his own face in the photo, at least 10 years older, lines deeply etched around the eyes, hair graying at the temples. Exactly like the reflection he'd glimpsed on his monitor. Michael's hands shook as he set down the photo. What exactly was he trading away each time he confirmed a transaction? The word exchange pulsed in his mind with new, disturbing implications. Yet the account statements blazed with promises of such wealth, security, certainty in an uncertain market. He backed away from the photo, from the evidence of a future simultaneously distant and immediate. The trade tomorrow, the big one he'd planned, would use a time exchange of 0.75. A cold, creeping sensation of pure dread settled in his stomach as he wondered what might be waiting for him afterward. Act 3. Terminus. Morning came with unnatural swiftness. Michael felt as though he blinked rather than slept, the night unnervingly compressed to a mere moment. He stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, searching for additional signs of aging, but finding only the same face he'd worn yesterday, save for a new crease between his brows. The trading floor hummed with heightened energy. A major tech company was announcing earnings after market close, and volatility metrics were spiking across the sector. On Michael's screen, the algorithm's predictive outputs for this event shimmered with an unusual intensity, highlighting the stock with a faint, almost eager glow. The perfect opportunity, or perhaps the formula itself sensed it, hungry for the exchange. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he entered the parameters. The time exchange value, 0.75. Pulsed on the screen, the decimal point between the digits appearing to stretch and contract as he stared at it. He recalled the prescription bottle, the financial statements, the photograph of himself with a stranger who would become significant to him in a future that was somehow already archived. "You all right?" Ellis paused by his desk. "You look burned out." Michael forced a smile. "Just under-caffeinated." Ellis lingered a moment too long, his expression unreadable. "Tempus fugit. Time flies around here," he said, before drifting away. Michael's blood turned to ice water at the casual comment. Did Ellis know? Or was Michael utterly alone in this accelerating nightmare? Could he see the temporal anomalies too? The confirmation dialogue appeared. Execute with time exchange 0.75. His cursor hovered over confirm. This trade would generate enough wealth to set him up for life. Early retirement, freedom from uncertainty, everything he'd worked toward. The cost was nebulous, theoretical, easily dismissed. The gain was concrete, measurable, intoxicatingly real. He clicked. The screen went black. Then, in a silent, synchronized wave, all screens went black across the entire trading floor. Exclamations of surprise rose around him, but Michael heard them as if through water, distorted and distant. In the darkness of his monitor, numbers began to glow, green digits, climbing at an impossible rate. The trade was executing, succeeding beyond his wildest projections. He was witnessing his own financial ascension, the culmination of years of work unfolding in seconds. Wealth beyond measure, security beyond doubt. But as the final figure stabilized, a sum so large it momentarily lost all meaning, his reflection materialized in the darkened glass. Not his own, or rather, it was himself, but older still. Gray hair, deeply lined face, eyes hollow with an exhaustion so bone-deep it felt terminal. The reflection's lips moved. "We made a mistake, Michael. God help us." Michael recoiled as the systems came back online, screens flickering to life around the trading floor. His trade had executed just as he'd seen in the blackout. He'd just made more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Yet the number, the vast sum, felt like salted earth in his mind. The triumph felt hollow, contaminated by a dread that was now a certainty. He closed his terminal and rose, legs unsteady. He needed to leave. Now, he needed to face whatever truth waited for him at home. Michael knew something was wrong before he even reached his apartment building. The doorman, a man he'd never seen before, greeted him by name, asking after a Mrs. Ramsey Michael didn't have, with the casual familiarity of years. In the elevator, his reflection in the polished brass panel showed his current self, but the hand reaching to press the button belonged to someone older. Liver spots, pronounced veins, a wedding band he'd never purchased. His door opened at the touch of his key, but the apartment beyond was suffused with the scent of years, like a stranger's home. No, his home, but lived in for decades. The white walls had yellowed completely, with faint rectangular ghosts where framed pictures had hung for years before being moved. The leather sofa was cracked deeply, stuffing visible at the seams. Dust motes swirled through shafts of late afternoon sunlight, though it had been morning when he'd left for work. On the coffee table sat a stack of mail, bills, bank statements, a postcard from Tokyo, its cheerful cherry blossom stamp mocking him. He didn't recognize the handwriting signing off with, "Love you, miss you," and beneath it all, a newspaper folded to display the obituary section. His eyes found his own name without searching. Michael Ramsey, 57, passed away following a brief illness. The date was exactly 3 weeks from today. His legs gave way. He sank onto the decrepit sofa, fingers trembling as they traced the lines of his own death notice. 57. He was 36 now. 21 years compressed into what? Weeks, days, hours. The sound of a key turning in the lock startled him. Fighting vertigo, he crossed the room, his movements sluggish and unfamiliar, his joints aching with an unnatural stiffness. A woman stood in the hallway, the same one from the photograph he'd discovered yesterday. Up close, her eyes held a familiar sadness that seemed to recognize something broken in him. "You're early today," she said, kissing his cheek before he could react. She moved past him into the apartment with the confidence of long intimacy. "You've been reading it again, haven't you?" she added, noticing the newspaper. "You need to stop torturing yourself," she chided gently. "The specialist said." "What's happening to me?" Michael interrupted, his voice barely a whisper. She turned, studying him with sudden intensity. "You're having one of your episodes again." She approached slowly, touching his face with delicate concern. "You're jumping, aren't you? Between then and now, the doctor said it might happen near the very end." Michael felt the floor tilting beneath him. "The end of what?" "Your time, Michael," she answered, eyes filling with tears. "The time you have left." Act 4. Mobius. "I need to go back," Michael whispered, backing away from the woman. His future wife, he supposed. Her expression shifted from concern to resignation. "You always say that," she replied softly. "But there's nowhere to go. This is where the formula led you." Before he could respond, the apartment wavered, walls rippling like heat distortion. The trading floor materialized around him, but wrong. Computers from different eras sharing desks, some terminals holographic, others ancient CRTs. Traders he recognized, some in fashions decades out of date, worked alongside strangers and empty chairs. Ellis seemed to coalesce nearby, watching him. "Tempus fugit," he said, but his mouth didn't move with the words. Michael stumbled toward his workstation. Modern one moment, obsolete the next. The formula glowed on the screen, the time exchange value field empty, a beckoning void. "I can reverse it," Michael said, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "A negative value. I can trade all this ill-gotten gain for past time." His apartment reassembled itself around him, the woman now sitting on the sofa beside his obituary. "That's not how it works," she said, her voice flat with an old, oft-repeated sorrow. "The exchange is permanent. What's done is done, Michael." "How do you know?" he demanded. But even as the words left his mouth, the trading floor returned. A new pattern in the formula caught his eye, a recursion function he hadn't noticed before. Time wasn't linear in the equation. It looped back on itself, each exchange creating new branches, entangled realities. "You've done this before," came Ellis's voice, as if from the very air around him. "Every version of you tries to go back. None succeed." The formula's variables rearranged themselves before Michael's eyes, complex patterns emerging that he somehow understood intuitively. He'd been looking at it completely wrong. The time exchange wasn't about trading portions of future for present gain. It was about collapsing his entire timeline into a single crushing point. Past, present, future, all converging into an inescapable now. He was suddenly in the apartment again, but changed. Photos on the walls showing a life with the woman, children he'd never met, vacations he'd never taken. The obituary on the coffee table now accompanied by medical reports detailing a degenerative condition. His body clock accelerating exponentially. "You've discovered the formula," the woman said, but her voice had changed, deepened. When Michael turned, Ellis sat in her place, a faint scent of her perfume still lingering. "Or it discovered you," said Ellis. Hard to say which came first when time isn't linear. The trading floor again. Michael at his terminal, staring at the time exchange field. He could enter a massive negative value, risk everything, what little remained of his fractured existence, on one final trade. "It won't work, Michael," said his older self, suddenly beside him. "We already tried." "Then what do I do?" Michael asked. "Accept it," his older self answered. "Or keep fighting. The result is the same. The only choice is how you live out the time you have left." His apartment. Early morning light. The woman sleeping peacefully beside him in a bed he didn't recognize yet somehow knew. On the nightstand, the obituary, the date unchanged. 3 weeks. The trading floor, his finger hovering over the enter key, a negative time exchange value so large the system displayed a warning. Catastrophic timeline disruption possible. His apartment, the woman's hand in his, warm and real. "Stay," she whispered. "Just be here with me now." The trading floor. Execute with time exchange -10.0. Michael closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was in both places at once. The keyboard under his fingers, the woman's hand in his. Each equally real, equally immediate. The scent of her skin mingling with the stale, ozone tang of the trading floor. There was no going back, no undoing what was done. The time he'd exchanged was gone forever. But the time he had left, however little, was still his to spend. With perfect clarity, Michael made his choice. He pressed the key. The screen went black. All screens. Everywhere. In his apartment, the woman smiled sadly. "You made the same choice you always do." "Did it work?" Michael asked, not knowing which version of himself was speaking. "That depends," she said, taking his hand as the darkness began to recede, "on what you were trying to accomplish." Around them, time rippled, folded, then snapped violently into its new configuration. Outside, sunrise painted the city gold as Tuesday began again. Back from that temporal maze, I see. Your consciousness patterns suggest proper vertigo. Most excellent. Poor Michael, trapped in a loop of his own design, forever pressing the key. He sought a shortcut to a guaranteed future, only to discover that the price of the ticket was the journey itself. The formula, you see, was never the true predator. It was merely the ecosystem that allowed his own desperate nature to consume him. It didn't create Michael's flaw. It simply offered him a catastrophic rate of interest. So, for my own ledgers of fate, do tell me, what is the most significant price you have ever knowingly paid for your own moment of certainty? Kindly leave your thoughts in the comments below. Farewell, my midnight scholars. Until next time, this is Nocturne saying, be careful what bargains you strike in the waking world. The debt is always collected while you sleep.